Okay, so the final thing we have to look at with the Minimoog is, well, ultimately it is the loudness contour, or amp envelope, if you may, which we have here. And of course, the Minimoog only has an ADS sort of envelope, or contour as we call it here. And it's controllable. There's actual functions that we'll talk about. But in general, you have for your amplitude, attack, decay, and sustain. So as you undoubtedly know, but we'll go over it without anything. We're just going to get this little pop sound. But we can turn up the attack and turn up the decay, and we'll get an attack and a decay. The attack is how long it takes for it to go to 0 to its loudest. The decay is how long it takes for it to go from its loudest back to 0. So if we have a quick attack time and a long decay, of course, it's immediately loud and then it decays. We can shorten that decay. And that's as much as we would expect, of course, but sometimes we want to hold a note, so we want to interrupt the decay with the sustain. So the sustain is a level that you choose in the midst of the decay, a voltage level, where that voltage will be held, meaning that the sound, the amplitude, stays at a certain level. Of course, you can turn it up. So the decay it will decay down to the sustain level you have set. But then it will hold at that level. Very basic. Now, of course, we're missing release, right? Because we'd like to be able to have, maybe the sound continue after we let go of the key, which is what release is really about in an ADSR. So what we can do is come over here. You may have noticed that there are a couple of switches over here, one for glide, which we'll talk about shortly, and one for decay. If we switch this switch on the decay side, all of a sudden we have a release. Basically, it's using the decay as the release. Now, I really wondered, was this really such a massive money-saving situation that they couldn't just include another knob instead of having this weird setup with an extra jack, which I don't know if anyone uses, because I still don't know anybody who has exactly this particular pin. But anyway, it just seems like, I don't know if they necessarily needed to avoid the ADSR here, but they did. And it's not such a big deal, though, because we have this decay switch. And basically all it really does is you press the key, the attack goes to its maximum in the amount of time that you've set. And then the decay begins, and the decay gets down to the sustain level. And as long as you hold the key, you're at the sustain level. And then when you let go, it goes back to the decay time and drops down from there. And that's basically what's happening. So you kind of basically do have an ADSR. An ADSR, but it just operates a little bit differently, and it sounds a little bit different. It's one of the defining factors of the Minimoog, actually. So that is what we have going on with the loudness contour. Some other functions you might notice: volume. You can turn off your main output, which is, I suppose, convenient for a number of reasons. Specifically, and I think this is the main one, if you turn off your main output, you still have your headphone output, so you could, in theory, be tuning. You could turn off the main output, tune your Minimoog, turn the main output back on, and you're cool. So for the purpose of tuning, of course, we have a headphone jack and a headphone volume, which is really helpful. We have the A440, which is an extra little oscillator that exists in the Minimoog that's supposed to be really stable and hover at A440 so that you can tune the Minimoog to it. So the thing I just described with the main output switch is a thing you could do. Switch it off and then press this. Look, we're right in tune, except for I'm pretty sure I remember that my A440 is not in tune. And I think calibration of that requires dismantling the Minimoog, which is fine. But still, you're not sure you really want to rely on an analog oscillator from the 50-year-old analog oscillator for your tuning source, but maybe. Okay, so over here we talked about the tune. I didn't really do anything about it, but that's your main tune. It tunes all the oscillators simultaneously, and it also acts as oscillator 1's tuning. So that's how you set the tuning for oscillator 1, and then you can tune oscillators 2 and 3 to that tuning. We have the glide, which we haven't talked about. The glide is off until you turn it on with this switch right here. Again, this glide came to be more often associated with something different, but anyway, it's portamento. Portamento is the term that we've come to use more than glide, and although some things use glide, there was a point at which glide became like an automatic pitch envelope for some synthesizers, as opposed to portamento being the lag of the voltage changes causing the scooping between the notes. So yeah, there's a lot of terminology that kind of shuffled around in the 70s, and this is one of the things we now call this portamento and don't call it glide, and glide got used in some other ways, although there are synthesizers that say glide and it is portamento. It's all kind of crazy, but it all works out. Some decent glide time there. And last, but certainly not least, we have the pitch knob, the famed pitch wheel that this is where it all began. This is where Bill Hemsath purportedly took his modular controller design and altered it to be a pitch wheel that we have here. And if you don't know, the first pitch wheel it has a detente or detente or however you pronounce it in the center, but then it's just like you can set it, which is really useful in the sense that you can tune. Your pitch wheel can stay at the frequency that you've pushed it to, which can be helpful. But a lot of us got used to being able to bend something and then flip back, let it go back to where it's supposed to be. But with the Minimoog pitch wheel, you've got to put it back on that center. And you'd better get it back there. The range. It looks like minor sixth. Yes. Less going downward, but yeah, so but that is our pitch wheel. I never use it. It's just kind of weird, but I have used it to transpose. That's really helpful. But not so much for the super cool playing. No matter what certain great keyboard players did with this, we can all be impressed with that, but it is weird using it at this point after having used its offspring so many years later. Yeah, and we do have these jacks here. If you have a pedal that fits these jacks, it's I honestly don't know what the name of the plug for these jacks is. And I think whatever it was, it died out immediately and was never used on anything again, because I've never even seen one. I don't know what goes in those holes. So, but if you did have the pedals that go in these holes, you'd have the ability to turn glide on and off whenever you wanted with your foot, and turn decay on and off whenever you wanted with your foot, a sort of sustain pedal kind of thing going on. But that is the Minimoog. And I will say, we should do this one last thing. If I could just throw this in at the end. Okay, so sometimes you're a person and you're like, gosh, I really wish the Minimoog had pulse width modulation. And it doesn't. But you can fake it. So but instead of using the square wave, it's not really actually pulse width modulation. It's an effect that sounds like pulse width modulation. What you have to do, and this is so weird, is you use oscillator 1 sawtooth wave. I guess you could use oscillator 2 sawtooth wave, but I'm just going to use 1. Then you turn on oscillator 3. Now we're just listening to a triangle here, right? And what I've done is, if you set it to the opposite wave saw, you just get, by virtue of these two saws having the opposite wave shape, you get this weird sort of pulse width modulation sounding sound. So it's a weird trick, but yeah, when you set these two saws to the opposite type of saw and play them together, there is this weird pulse width modulation sounding sound that occurs, and that's the trick to that. And this has been the Moog Minimoog, and this, of course, is number 5055 from 1974. Let's see if I can dig up the picture of the tag from inside so you can see that. And yeah, it's also signed by a wide variety of synthesizer luminaries, including Bill Hemsath and Herb Deutsch, David Borden, David Van Koevering, Larry Fast, Thomas Dolby, Howard Jones, Gary Newman. Let's see, who have I forgotten here? I think that's most of them. But Herb Deutsch, did I say Herb Deutsch? Anyway, yeah, this is a very special Minimoog, so yes, I think at some point it's going to have to end up in a special place. But for now, it is Mark Doty's Minimoog, as it has been for the last 22 or more years.